Welcome to Pharmacovigilance Podcast. Today we will speak about how AI is transforming pharmacovigilance. And I have my guest in the studio, Daniel. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Julia. My name is Daniel Kapfer from Genly AI. I'm the CEO of a company which is located close to Frankfurt in Germany.
That's great. And what is your company doing?
My company is about regulatory reporting and automation of regulatory reports, aggregate reports, and other types of reports. Also in the area of auditing, in the area of validation, and in the area of pharmacovigilance. We developed a platform that is automate the generation of pharmacovigilance reports.
Before we start with the discussion, can you tell a little bit about your way to AI? How did you find this exciting topic?
I studied physics and medicine, and I'm a medical doctor by profession. Automation has always been something that I was interested in. When I was a very young kid, I was playing around with the first computers out there. And then during my studies, I was working also with MRI pictures and these huge volumes, data sets. In 2016, we started working with AI. In the very beginning, we started with natural language processing. So technology extraction of specific entities. And I was really overwhelmed by the amount of data they had to process. They had to read hundreds to thousands of papers. It was kind of a dense atmosphere. Also, they had those deadlines and so on. And I was starting to talk to people, and we were starting to work with a huge company providing these reports, curated ones to pharma companies. Is that something that has to be included or excluded from the review? This was super interesting, starting in 2018.
It seems like you've been on this journey quite a long time and you have a lot of experience, right? And it seems like you have a mission here to change the way we operate. What was your main learning on this way for all these years?
I think that especially when we're talking about pharmaceutical industry or life science in general, it's about the patient. It's about the human being. And it's as you and me, we could both be patients.
Yes.
And I think everyone has the experience of taking a drug and maybe not feeling well afterwards. And was this now a side effect or not? And I think it is super important to really keep the human being in the focus. And whatever you do, if you use AI or software in general or any other means, it should serve the human being. And this is I would say, greatest takeaway from all this time, that also when you introduce new ways of working, you need to take the people with you. There's not a problem with money. There's not a problem with technology. You can solve many of these, or you can restrict it to those ways where it works well. But the human being is the central element, and it will stay the central element in all these processes for at least a very long time from now on. How long this will be, I can't tell, but this is where I see the greatest power, when you can television, get these early adopters around you run something new, show that it's working like a light tower, and then roll it out through an organization, and people start working with it. This is so good seeing this, and when people tell you that it's really surprising that your work now is giving me relief on all these tasks that are so mundane to do, that is something, it's satisfying, actually.
That's a really great reflection. Why we're doing we're there for patient, we are there for make people life easy, and also the stakeholder management to go through the process and the human behind the scene, and that's very interesting. Let's maybe focus on the company you created, Genly AI. So what do you do? Who are your typical clients?
Yeah, so we're typically working with two sorts of clients. The first client is consultancies doing, as you know, pharmacovigilance is outsourced in many cases, or at least partially outsourced. And those consultancies are doing the job, and they need support in these areas. And AI can help a lot here. And the second type of customer is end customers like pharmaceutical companies, but also medtech companies and biotech companies, because we're not focusing on pharmaceutical industry only, but also on medtech.
I think I've seen in your homepage, so you're working with the pharmacovigilance and clinical research, market access, regulatory services as well, right?
Right. So it's quite a variety. Where we see our focus right now is to provide an assistant with which you can draft the first draft of a regulatory or pharmacovigilance document or clinical document or regulatory document. And this draft then has to be reviewed by a human being. And we're quite intensively working on to do it very effectively and efficient for the reviewer to work with the drafted dossier or drafted section or whatever he or she is working on. So it's from our perspective, it is I can help you with these first steps, but as many authorities are requiring a human being to be the last in the chain, we purposely built that tool on human in the loop or human on the loop. It can process some parts of documents without human interaction, but in the end, a human has to make sure that everything is correct in that document. And it's super important that we see this as blended intelligence. So a human working together with an AI. We also focus on how can we keep pharmacovigilance experts in specific, but also other experts, subject matter experts, how can we keep them engaged in their work, engaged in not losing focus? Because what we have seen with automation in the past and AI in special is that the human being tends to lose focus when an AI takes over responsibility. Well, it does not take over responsibility. Actually, it does some work. And if you trust it, you start to lose your focus. And we think it's super important to keep the human subject matter expert really in focus. So, for example, with some of the sections in the PSUR, we provide two different options. And the subject matter expert has to decide which option he or she is taking as a draft.
Yes. So if we look for the pharmacovigilance processes, where do you see the biggest wins for using AI? What kind of processes where you can have fast result and most efficient?
Well, if you take a look at the whole value chain from the very beginning to the very end, I think that case intake is for sure one of the biggest levers that we have. It's actually not our focus, but this is something where I think a huge amount of data has to be processed and has to be stored in a specific format, and this can be helping a lot. And then there is a lot of literature that you have to read. I think this is the second part. And then the third part where we see high, I would call it, automation grade possible, that is in drafting the reports, decision support inside of the value chain. I think that is the third part where I see a great potential.
So when you come to the pharma and work in the pharma company, what do you see? What is the status, the people, their level of understanding, level of training, level of acknowledgement of it? So what's your experience? Are we there? Or not yet as pharma professionals?
A very good question. From my point of view, pharma is not as fast as other industries. And for sure, this is also because it's highly regulated. And, you know, we have been working with AI intensively now for 8 years. And what the common answer that I get when I talk to pharmaceutical clients is very often, we can't really use this because we're not able to validate it. So there is some kind of sorrow or fear that you can't use this, and an inspection will reveal that it's not validated and not backed by data and evidence. So there is definitely, I would call it, a small gap between other industries and pharmaceutical industry. At the same time, I think when we talk about knowledge working in general, the pharmaceutical industry is a perfect example on how knowledge work can be different in the future, because there's really a lot of fundamental data that is used to build those reports, for example.
Yeah.
And it's so huge, the amount of knowledge that we have. It's every year there's tens of thousands of papers coming out. A human being is barely able to cope with it. So this is something where I think that AI will support a lot. And what I see is that there is, especially in the small and medium businesses, there is the will to do, but in many cases it's kind of, how do we do it? What is a good use case? Where can I test it? How can I really enable my employees to do it? I think this is something, especially in the DACH region, I would say it is like there's a transformation blockage. So if we can get rid of this block, there's a huge amount of possibilities and a huge efficiency gain that is possible here.
So if we speak about the efficiency gain and for the company of the small size, what would be your recommendation? Most of the company use Microsoft license and you probably have the Copilot. So what can you provide some example of how we can use Copilot to be efficient or where we can gain the efficiency without putting a lot of investment in the AI, the small wins?
Yeah. Typically, many of the companies, as you say, are using Copilot or at least having it around. And my suggestion and also my advice would always be play around with it. Play around. Use some of your time dedicated to playing around with it and not just put a paper in it and make it do something more strategic. Have a goal and then set each week maybe 2 or 4 hours and go after this strategic goal and try to really reach it. So for example, I think it's super important. The easiest thing that you can have is when you have meetings, use Copilot to gather all information before you go to the meeting. Make sure that you have used Copilot as a companion or as a kind of advisor that is giving you some information on how to be efficient in that meeting. Because many meetings are not super prepared. People go there, sit around. So what is my goal in that meeting? And use Copilot as a sparring partner. And this is giving you also some additional thoughts on it. And then after the meeting, let Copilot summarize those meetings and so on. This is the easiest thing that you can do. It's available, it's here, and it should be done because it's super efficient. When we're talking about more advanced use cases, I think you should have something like a transformation team that is working on some, I would say, more focused topics. For example, if you're talking about the generation of some drafts or some sections, you can also use Copilot for doing so, as long as your organization is allowing that data is going to Copilot. But you can start working on it and you can also learn how to do it in a way that it is quality-wise and a good approach. And then before you do that, you have to really think about how can I reach quality? How do these models work? What is the problem with these models? And how can I set up guardrails that those models are keeping, for example, only the data that you provide and not doing something out of nowhere, what they do actually. So getting rid of hallucination, at least minimizing hallucination, I think that is something that is super important. But you need to think about that before it. And from my point of view, you really need to be playing around with the tools as soon as possible. Many people refrain. I think it's super important to just do it.
Have fun, right?
It could, by the way, it could be fun.
So you touched that get rid of the hallucination, and maybe we can discuss this risk and hallucination. And I think just yesterday I read an article from the Swedish main newspaper that said that was a governance report, and now they call it back because they cited study that's not existed, that it was, I put in place a lot of study non-existent. So does it happen often?
Yeah, hallucination rates, typically they are not provided from the foundation models, but they will be somewhere around 10 to 15%. I don't know, that might be something That varies. It varies what kind of parameters you look at and what kind of situations you look at. But there is ways to at least make sure that the typical hallucinations won't appear. And for sure, this is what I say. Take a look at autonomous driving. If you take a look at this, how did it evolve over time? It started with you manually driving a car. This was level 0. Then we went to level 1, which was feet off. You can drive, but you don't need your feet anymore because the car is accelerating and braking. And then it was kind of, the next thing was hands off, eyes off, attention off, and then full automated driving. And the same will happen with all the other situations as well. We are currently, what I think is, we're currently somewhere between level 2 and level 3 in pharmacovigilance. So there is some aspects where you can have feet off and hand off, and there's something produced, but you can't go attention off. So you need a human being with subject matter expertise to judge whether a thing was created correctly or not. We're talking about generative AI here. Yeah.
Yes.
There's other ways of AI or other AI or forms of AI that are explainable and trustworthy. You can really see why it came to that decision. But talking about generative AI, I think there is at least a human needs to be checking the sources, making sure that everything is all right. And this is something where I think it's super important that we currently are still caring for young colleagues to grow and to get enabled and get better and get expertise. Because there is some fear around that young colleagues are not needed anymore because the simple work is done by AI. But this is kind of too short thinking, because we know who should care about it in 5 years or in 10 years.
I listened to the program this morning, and they were speaking about AI and how it's changing, so that we are shifting from everything analytical and data, because this piece can be managed by AI, and we need to have more focus on the human and the emotions and the feelings around it, so that it's shifting in a way from the mind to the heart and the emotion.
Maybe this is the vision that we have generally, is that we create an environment where the human being has more time to be.
Exactly.
With what the human being is able to. It is creative. It is super. It can combine super important things together, and the human being can come to conclusions where I think the current AI is far off. And when we're talking about emotions, I think that the reality is there is no emotions in those generative AI models. There's no. But there is something like, you could call it a representation of emotions, and it's mimicking
analysis. They understand and analyze.
So there are people out there who fall in love with AI. And for sometimes I think there's also some danger in making this AI more human, or at least talking to it as a human being, because it is not. And this is something where our vision is freeing people from doing the mundane and really annoying tasks, and giving them more time to learn, more time for communication and exchange, more time to reflecting, and having the time for strategic work, having the time for really making judgments and conclusions. I think that is where the human being has its superpower.
That's great. I have just 2 questions to you before we finish. The first question is regarding the way can people learn more about AI. So what's your recommendation, I think, for the PV professional? So where we can find more information.
Yeah. So the first thing is go to the foundation model providers. You can go to Anthropic, Google, OpenAI. You can go to Mistral, whatever you choose, and there is always free courses. They offer free courses, and you should just do those free courses. They seem to be technical, but actually they're not. And you can do all these things without being a super technician. And this is something where AI really helps in the daily basis. So that is my first recommendation. The second recommendation is for all the countries, I don't know the associations, but typically I would go to the associations and see what they are providing in terms of learning. And then in addition, you can ask your model. Yeah, you can ask your model. I want to learn something about how to use AI. Make me a plan and then execute this plan together. This is super simple, and it can adapt to your learning, to your learning capabilities and time. And
that's great. So then my last question here is from the private perspective, what kind of tools do you use and what's your favorite tool?
My private perspective?
So if you're not speaking about the PSUI, the processing, but if we're looking from the private life, so what's your favorite tools? What do you use?
Yes, so I use all the models, actually. There is nothing that I really prefer. These days, I think that Anthropic is providing some added value, which I like very much. But I have no bad experience with others like Gemini or any other model. I use it on a daily basis, but from time to time I remind myself, well, let's do a typical research you have done when you were studying, for example. Go out, read literature, try to do it on your own, and then compare with what you do. So I think it is super important to stay alive.
Yes.
You know, don't put your brain into your small pocket computer that you have with you, and also keep a little of skepticism.
That's healthy, right? Great. So that was very inspiring conversation, and the human touch, human in the loop, human touch and all this. And for our listeners, so if they want to get into contact with you, where they can find you, your company.
Yeah, sure. So you can always go to the website genly.ai. It's written JENLY.ai. And you can see what we're doing. And of course, you can also contact me at daniel@genly.ai at any time. If you have any questions or if you are interested in what we are doing, we would be super happy to give you some more background.
Great. Thank you very much for being my guest in the studio. And thank you everyone for listening. And then stay safe and stay compliant.